Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today is no exception. We have a great guest all the way from Kansas City. Welcome to the show, Nate Astle.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, great to have you here. Now, Nate, you are interested in the people side of money, which is super cool. And I'm excited to have this conversation, but maybe before we dive into the details, perhaps give a little bit of your backstory and how you got to this point in your journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a financial therapist. And what that means is I help people with thoughts, feelings, behaviors around money. And so I kind of fell into this field by chance, but it was a really great fit for me. I got my master's in couples and family therapy, but always was interested in money and how that was showing up in relationships, how it was showing up in financial decision-making with our emotions, and how mental health and financial health are connected. So that's been my journey. I've been in the field for about 8 years, and I've got to work with a lot of really interesting people and work with investors, work with business professionals, and work with the general public as well. So it's been a good journey for me.
I love it. I'm going to hit you with a definition, and this is, I'll say, my definition. It's not a dictionary definition. And the word is stress. And my definition is that stress is the result of a gap between expectation and reality. And it's in that gap that stress lives. If there's no gap, there's no stress. And so often, there's really only two variables. You've got expectation and reality. Sometimes you can change the reality, often not. And then the only other one that's left is expectation, which I think is probably, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. How does that resonate with some of the conversations you get into, in particular with investors?
Yeah, I think stress is something, like, we all know what stress feels like. We sometimes use that word, I would even say too much, when we say we're stressed, but what we're actually feeling is scared or nervous or excited, or like we have a lot of other words, but sometimes we use stress to make up that difference. But what you're talking about, like expectations versus reality, that's a big thing to focus on in financial decision making. And it's an important skill that we're able to check in with our expectations and truly ask ourselves, is this realistic? Is this aligned with our values? And is this expectation or this desire or urge, is this coming more from an emotional place rather than a place that's centered in my values and centered in the data? So it's always important that we're able to check in with the emotions, because emotions are the often unseen driver of many of our financial decisions. I would even argue all of our financial decisions are at least partially motivated by emotion, even if we're unaware of it.
So money is fuel, and whatever belief system you have around money, the more of it you have, it'll simply amplify that. So if all you know is how to spend money, then the more money you have, the more you'll spend. If you're a professional investor, the more money you have, the more you'll invest, and so on. And yet often we think that money solves problems. I would say that it can, but it can also amplify them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
For sure. Absolutely. Money solves lack of money problems. It also can create other problems. And we definitely can't look to money as solving all of our problems. We will be disappointed if that's our expectation. A lot of times people look to money as a substitute for other things. I'm not trying to get preachy here, but it's just like, we look to money to make us feel better, or look to money to give us a sense of identity or sense of worth. But a lot of times we have financial solutions to what are really emotional problems. And so if we learn to reframe that, it's like, maybe I don't have a money problem or a spending problem or this problem. Maybe I have a spending solution to another problem that I'm not really dealing with or working through. It helps us make sense of what money is and what it isn't. In my experience working with all sorts of high income, low income, all sorts of different money backgrounds, the existence of money doesn't actually make us happy. It just solves some of the financial stressors. I
love it. Now, when we're dealing with investors, there's a wide spectrum, of course. The sophisticated investors, they bring more discipline. They bring even professional money managers to the table who will analyze an opportunity, and they're quick when the criteria are not met to say no, which is exactly as it should be. And yet I also believe that so you can get the math to tell you no, and the math can tell you maybe, but it won't give you a yes. The yes requires an emotional component, I believe. And that's not necessarily formulaic. How does that play in the conversations you have with clients?
Yeah, what our emotions tell us is data, right? So we have the financial data that says yes or no, this is a good idea or maybe not so good of an idea of an investment. But emotions are also data. And if we ignore the emotional data, it skews our graphs. We have to check in with what our emotions are telling us. And emotions aren't going to say, yes, this is the right thing necessarily, but emotions can warn us. Emotions can also, if we're not aware of them, if we're not taking care of our emotions, they can make the decision for us. If everything says that this is a good thing, but I just have so much fear of making the wrong decision because I have so many people depending on me, or I have so much fear about making the wrong decision because when I was a kid, I was like making mistakes wasn't a safe thing. This is an example of something that's totally not related to the investment decision, directly impacting your ability to make decisions. And so we've got to be able to say, all right, what are the emotions I'm having? Where are they coming from? And do I need to listen to this emotional feeling? Or is this maybe coming more from my past or from my trauma or anything like that? Even just being aware of the emotions we're having is going to help us make better financial decisions.
Absolutely. And of course, well, let's talk about why someone would engage a financial therapist as opposed to a different kind of therapist. My wife happens to run a therapy clinic in my home city. And so I know the spectrum of things that folks come and see her for. And I'm sure money comes into play, even if it's not central to the discussion. Mm-hmm. What makes what you're doing different?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of overlap between traditional therapy and financial therapy. It's kind of like going to a specialist for I can go see my general practitioner doctor, but if I have something with my nose, I might go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And financial therapists are specialized with dealing with money difficulties, not just money stress or overspending, although that certainly does come up, but also things like money trauma. I grew up and my parents worshipped money, or I grew up in poverty. And even though I'm in a different financial situation now, the ghosts of the past still haunt me. I do a lot of work with couples who fight about money. That's at least for me, it's a huge area of conflict is couples. But really, anytime that you need support with changing the way you think, feel, or behave around money, financial therapist is a good place to start.
I love it. Now, there's often the belief that, well, I don't have an emotional problem. I just have a money problem. If I only had an extra fill in the blank, 50 grand, 100 grand, million in my bank account, my problems will be solved. It's a money problem. It's not an emotional issue. I'm sure you've heard that once or twice.
Yeah. Does more money help certain problems? Sure. But no, I don't think it's correct that more money solves the problem. Even if more money would help part of the problem, how you feel about that money, what you do with that money, your decision-making around how you use that money, that's all connected to your emotions. It's all connected to your beliefs. It's all connected to your thought patterns. You don't get to engage with money and not by influence by your life experience. We like to think about money as if this hard quantitative truth, and this is what you're supposed to do, and this is the right thing, and there's these rules. But reality is humans don't make decisions like that. It's kind of like, someone who studies economics who likes to think that this is how economies work, but we also have to acknowledge that there's a human component, right? And humans aren't logical, aren't rational. They're driven by all this stuff. And our job is to make sure that we're at least aware of all these pieces, but hopefully also working on all these personal aspects of ourselves because it impacts the decisions we make.
One of the things that many investors are dealing with, not just investors, homeowners all over America, the fact that interest rates have gone up significantly since the days of the historically low interest rates that we have for close to a decade. And I think one of the things that therapists often espouse is to focus on being present. Being present really helps keep you grounded, but you still often have the reality that I have a note that's due in whatever, 2 years, 2 months, whatever the time is, and my interest rate's going to double. And just by being present doesn't make that reality change. So there is this forward-looking component that is often a stressor of what the future might bring. And that often can be a source of enormous problems in planning, in many different aspects of financial life. Where does that come into play?
Yeah, I think being present is good when we're managing stress, especially when our minds kind of races and we try to solve all of our problems all at once. And I do think it's important that we're able to slow down and be like, what is it that I have control over today? What is it that I have influence over right now? A lot of empowerment that comes on knowing the difference between what's something I can influence versus what's something out of my control. For example, interest rates. I don't control the interest rates, and I can't live my life pretending that I can. But I also need to be able to plan for the future, and you can be both present and forward-looking without letting either dominate your perspective.
I love that.
So it's not an either or, thankfully.
No, that's exactly right. We're often culturally conditioned to think in binary terms. Good and bad things are mutually exclusive, when things that maybe sound contradictory can in fact coexist. Well, Nate, if folks want to connect, if they want to learn more, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Look for Nate Astle, financial therapist. My practice is the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, but I like talking about anything that, as it relates to how humans experience their money. And yeah, if there's questions or if there's need resources, even if I'm not the person to help you for whatever reason, I do care about people getting the help they need. And so I'm happy to point you or any listeners to maybe another resource if that could be helpful.
Love it. Well, Nate, love the conversation. And for the listeners at home, you definitely want to connect with Nate Astle at the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute.com. The links will be in the show notes. And in the meantime, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.